Now let's take a look at using Battery 3's individual outs with Ableton Live. So I've loaded up a live set here. I've loaded Battery 3 onto one of the MIDI tracks, and it's playing a simple drum groove, and it sounds like this. So all of these drum sounds are coming through a single track, and we solo this, we hear that just this drum groove is coming through this track. But it doesn't give us a great deal of flexibility in terms of processing these hits individually, because whatever effect we apply to this track is going to apply to all of these drum hits. And we might want to have more flexibility than that in terms of compression and saturation or whatever else you can think of. We want to kind of divide and conquer with these hits. Battery accommodates that quite easily, so you can select the cell that you wish to send the signal from, and then come down here to this output section. At the bottom there is this channel selector, and if I click on this, it brings up 16 different stereo outputs, and I can select one for this bass drum, for example, stereo out 3 and 4, and then if I play my drum groove again, you'll hear that that bass drum has dropped out because now it's being sent to stereo out 3 and 4, which is not being received in Ableton, but that's easily solved. So let's go back into our live set here and create a new track using Control-T or Apple-T, depending on what system you're working on, and that will create a new audio track. We want audio, not MIDI here. And what we want to do is make sure that we have our input-output section showing, and so I'm going to minimize this clip view so that we can see this. I'm just kind of trying to economize space here. And here you see this audio from section. Now what we want to do here for the kick drum, for the bass drum at least, is click on this top level drop down and go to Battery 3, which is the track that has Battery 3 on it. And then in the lower level, we want to go to this outputs 3 and 4. And a kind of nice thing about this is that Ableton will show you which of these outputs actually is registering a signal. And here we see that 3 and 4 is registering that kick drum, even in this drop-down view. So once I click on that, it's now accepting this. But we're not hearing it because we don't have the monitor set to on. So I'm going to click this on monitor in, and then unsolo this. And now we see that our kick drum is on a separate track, and I can solo this kick drum. And now you can easily imagine what the possibilities are, because now you have this dedicated track for the kick drum, and we can also create dedicated tracks for the other drum elements, which is what I'm going to do now, and then I'm going to kind of fast forward and we'll come back when I've done all that. Great, so I'm back now and I've divided up all of these different hits into different tracks. So we have Battery 3 on one track here, we have our kick drum, our snare, closed hat, tom, and side stick. And then I have done Control-G to group these all together, and that will allow us to kind of use these as an individual unit and collapse them, and also add effects to the entire group if we want. Now in the case of kick, I can add this kick huge warm preset that you can find under Ableton's effects and audio effect rack drum processing. And so what that will do is add some compression and EQ to our sound. Here's how it sounds. And that's versus this. So you hear it add some punch and some depth to that. What's nice is that you're adding that only to the kick drum, so you're being very surgical about how you're doing the processing. And likewise with the snare, I have added some compression, but in this case I've used a third-party plugin called Vintage Warmer 2, which is kind of an essential plugin. It's a wonderful compression unit from PSP software, very organic sounding, and I can solo this as well. You hear I'm getting some slight compression there, but it's very organic sounding. It's a very nice unit. So you see the versatility here. You can use your own host's processing capabilities. You can use third-party plugins, and in each case you can be very focused on how you use them. So once we get this going, of course, we can also come back to the entire group and use something like this acoustic kit submix rack that allows us to add some very light compression over the entire mix and kind of draw it together. Now what else is cool about this is that if I solo this drum group, you see that I have reverb in here, so I can crank this up and add some reverb to our entire mix. Don't want to overdo that, of course. So that should give you a sense for some of the versatility and the power involved with dividing up these tracks and then processing them individually, or dividing up the drum parts and processing them individually. It gives you a great deal of flexibility and control over your sound, and it's also a lot of fun, and it gives you a real sense of how the individual parts really come together and form your drum groove. So I hope you found this to be a clarifying experience for you in terms of using battery and using Ableton. Of course, you're not limited to using battery with this technique. You can use this in Ableton with just about anything you can think of. But battery is great because it gives you that ability to use separate outputs for your distinct drum parts, or if you choose to group drum parts together and use a single dedicated output just for that group. So as I always say, sky's the limit. Hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you again soon.